Hello and welcome everyone to Your Higher Self. I'm Oceane, a clinical hypnotherapist and the owner of Guys Teaching. And today I am joined with a beautiful Freya, who is a sex educator. And I'm so excited for this episode. So, hello, Freya. Welcome and
Hello.
thank you for joining us. And just talk a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. I'm a sex educator, like you said. I work one-on-one with clients doing sort of education and coaching in the realm of sexuality. Um, Generally specifically female sexuality, although I have started working with men as well. And I'm also a yoni mapping therapist. So I do, yeah, this quite niche modality called yoni mapping therapy. It's different to that sort of neo-tantric yoni massage that maybe people assume. It's a lot more therapeutic and nurturing. And I work with vagina owners in that department doing private one-on-one sessions in person. And I also have a podcast called the Labia Lounge where, yeah, we talk about all things sex and womanhood and personal development. So those are kind of my jams.
I love that. And what made you start doing this?
My own sexual trauma, basically. I was doing a lot of personal development work to work on my mental health, and eventually when I was having a lot of success with that and realizing that I could change my patterns and I could change the way that I moved in the world and looked at the world and overcome certain things that I had kind of just accepted, thinking I was always going to suffer with. I was like, "Oh, damn. Well, if I can kind of tackle that, then maybe I can actually face this big, daunting, terrifying topic of sex and, my body, like being naked was terrifying, sharing myself intimately with someone was terrifying. I was really messed up about sex. Um, and it was impacting my relationships, it was impacting my confidence and like literally every aspect of my life. And so yeah, after a few years of kind of getting really deep in the personal development world and becoming a bit of a workshop junkie, I thought, all right, like it's time, I'm gonna do this thing. So I started just working on my own, like myself with sexuality and my sexual trauma and shame. And after a few more years of that, just found it so helpful and had come so bloody far that I then, at that point was so passionate about it, and realized what a difference that was making in my life, and started doing practitioner trainings and actually studying to do this as my thing.
Wow, I love that. So I know that you said about your trauma, and I wanted to bring that up a little bit. Obviously, not going to your own trauma, but talking about how looking at your sexuality and being comfortable within your sexuality, how that can actually help you overcome trauma. Because a lot of us don't realize that we actually store trauma in our muscles and in our organs, and it can manifest in health issues and with women or anybody with a vagina, it can actually manifest, any trauma can manifest within your vagina and within your womb. So, just going on a little bit about exactly how um, overcoming your sexuality and loving yourself and having all of that can help overcome trauma.
Hmm. Yeah, it was a really massive piece for me. Like you were saying, we do store trauma and emotions in our tissues. It's really common, especially around sexual trauma or sexual shame and conditioning and guilt, that we would store it in our vaginas, in our womb spaces. They're very inherently kind of feminine spaces, and so anything that is an attack on the feminine or an attack on us will be trauma. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't have any major trauma, like I've never been sexually assaulted or raped or no one's ever like done this or that, like or oh, this thing happened, but like it wasn't that bad, like it's not trauma." And I'm like, "Babe, it is all trauma. Like do not minimize it just because it's not, some explicit thing that's really obviously a violation doesn't mean it's not trauma. Like we, in our formative years, we go through high school, for instance, through puberty, and if someone bullies us or makes fun of our appearance or teases us, like an example in my case would be teasing me for having tiny boobs, or being really hairy, having too much body hair, which obviously then extends to like shame around having pubic hair. If someone, I had a friend in high school who hooked up with a guy, and then next week at school, he was spreading the word that he fingered her and she had a smelly, fishy pussy, things like that. Like even though they were consensual and everything to begin with, like those sorts of things just add layers and layers of shame and trauma, and they can be stored in our tissues. So yeah, overcoming our conditioning around sex and our guilt around pleasure or around receiving, and um, this kind of people pleasing, self-sacrificing bent that a lot of women have had drilled into us, from the kind of outdated patriarchal systems and expectations of women. Like it is really, really paramount to actually healing our trauma, because all of that conditioning, all of that shame, all of that guilt and apologeticness around even existing, around having a vagina, around being too much or too little, or all of that we women cop, that is all really traumatic and it's damaging. And if we start to heal that and empower ourselves, we start to actually embrace our feminine, whether we like, regardless of gender. I'm just thinking most of the people I work with identify as women. Some do not, but they have a vagina, and so they get treated as a woman, and they are still like, um, they still receive a lot of that same kind of stigma and judgment from society. So yeah, it's really important, and that's kind of like the basis of my work is like, right, well, what are your beliefs around yourself, around your vagina, around being, someone in this female body, and where have they come from, and how can we do away with the ones that aren't actually helpful or healthy? Because we're mostly living with like no small amount of limiting beliefs and negativity that's directed at our, womanhood or femininity. And then to add to that, there's like actual, layers of trauma and things that have happened, maybe violations. And that all really affects our sexual health, our enjoyment of sex, our relationships, our ability to have boundaries, and to receive pleasure. Like it affects everything. So, I've kind of like gone about this in a really convoluted way. It's just something I'm passionate about. But yeah, healing this stuff is fucking awesome. And it will start to help you release that sort of traumatic energy or traumatic imprint from your tissues that's being held. Because if you are holding that, that sort of stuff in your body, which most of us are to some degree, um, it can cause numbness in the vagina. It can cause atrophy. It can cause scar tissue. It can cause contraction and tightness, which then doesn't allow blood flow, doesn't allow pleasure. It can cause disconnect. And so we're not having satisfying sex. We're not having, beautiful, pleasurable self-pleasure sessions. Like we're kind of getting cut off from what our bodies have to offer because of that trauma, and all of that conditioning.
Yeah, I wanted to also say with the energy, like feminine energy, I feel like no matter our gender or what we identify as, we all have feminine and masculine energy.
Yeah.
So obviously, right now we're talking mostly about the feminine energy, but when it comes to gender or anything like that, energy flows. So right now we're focusing
Yeah.
on that feminine energy. But actually, what you have just said, you've answered a little bit of the question I will ask. But I remember this week actually, someone asked me, "How do you know that you need, healing and that you need guidance?" So I want to ask you that. How does somebody
Mhm.
know that they need healing or just focusing on their sexual energy and that feminine energy?
Well, with my work, it generally people come to me once it's become pretty obvious that they need help, and they need some support healing, because it gets kind of worse over time in their, especially in long-term relationships or whatever. And over the course of their dating life as well, they start to notice things um, that are really getting in the way of them having like deeper connection or really amazing pleasure and intimacy. Like, people will often have um, body image issues. That's really common. Pretty much everyone has some level of that, especially the clients that come and see me. A bit of a rejection of the feminine sides of themselves. So they're kind of trying to play at a man's game to earn respect or power or feel validated and carve out a space for themselves. So rather than like um, being powerful from, in a way that's like, I guess, honoring the feminine essence in them, they're really leaning into the masculine that's in them, and kind of that's the dominant thing, which like for a lot of people with vaginas, like the feminine essence is generally like naturally the more dominant side. Like we have both and we fluctuate and it's fluid, but I notice like people sort of really leaning into the masculine to the point where it's not naturally where they would sit. And so they're neglecting their feminine and it's disconnecting them from their bodies, from their vaginas, from their pleasure, from their ability to be in that yin kind of feminine space where they can surrender and receive. And people just trying to beat men at their own games. So that's like a big one, like really really assertive, like outwardly confident, like powerful women who are like, maybe in corporate roles or maybe quite sort of tomboyish or something. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But a lot of them will come to me and be like, I cannot come with a partner. I can't orgasm with a partner. I just can't get out of my head. I can't surrender and receive pleasure. I always have to be giving. And when I'm trying to receive, I just don't feel anything, or I can't actually let go. Like they don't feel comfortable to let go. It's because they're stuck in their masculine all the time and they're trying to be in that sort of dominant space. So, you know, how you'd know you would need healing. I feel like people, most people are going to know, but I suppose maybe some people uh, almost get used to a baseline. Like my baseline was so like pitiful. Like I couldn't be naked in front of a boyfriend I'd been with for 3 years. But I was like, no, that's fine. Like that's fine. It's not, that's all right. And I was like terrified of certain I didn't want to let anyone go down on me because I was so worried about what I looked like, what I smelled like, what they would think. Like I was intensely self-conscious. I had a lot of body loathing around my breasts, around my body hair, um, these sorts of things, which you can get by. You can totally get by, but you're not thriving and you're not able to really enjoy sex if you've got all of these hang-ups, which, I mean, I don't know how you would get to adult life without having hang-ups like these, really, in the
Mm.
world that we live in. So definitely no judgment. But yeah, if you've got things like that that are holding you back, maybe some healing in this department could be good. If you've had any kind of sexual trauma, whether it just be people bullying you about, anything relevant, to like someone, over sexualizing you, making you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, anyone crossing your boundaries, if you feel violated, there's, a big spectrum of what kind of comes under sexual trauma. Any of that, if like you struggle to communicate your boundaries and your desires with a partner, if you feel uncomfortable, um, you know, asking questions of a new lover if you're hooking up about their sexual health status, or have they been tested for STIs lately, or if you feel uncomfortable giving them direction and saying, actually, I really like it more if you go a bit more gently, or oh, actually, I'd like a bit of foreplay before we have penetration. Do you mind if we just do some oral sex before we get to the penetration? Like if you can't speak up for yourself and you can't communicate about these things like comfortably with a lover, then there's definitely work to be done there. So there's lots of different ways. But if there's any element of your sort of sex life that you're not satisfied with, or that you feel uncomfortable about, then there's always going to be like underlying causes to that, and some sort of specific healing around this area could be really helpful.
Well, I love that you gave us so much information that now I'm like, oh, okay, there's so many points to hit right now, but I do want to say also, if there is some background noise, I have a lizard, a monitor lizard behind me. So if there's
Amazing.
random noises, it's a lizard. I'm like, oh, can quiet up now.
Love that.
Yeah. But anyways, other than Florence rudely interrupting us, if someone wants to get more within their feminine energy, what kind of tips would you give them?
Um, this is a bit of a controversial topic, and I'm not an expert on that
Mhm.
specifically. So I don't really feel comfortable going too deeply into it. I definitely feel like um in the bedroom though specifically, it I do talk to clients about um getting better at receiving and not having to be the one in charge or initiating or and like everyone's got a different dynamic in the bedroom, and it depends on their partner as well, whether they're more comfortable taking the lead and initiating or giving or receiving. But if someone is I had a client who was really uncomfortable receiving, but she loved giving because she was in control. She felt powerful and sexy when she was giving. Um, but she often didn't come with a partner because she struggled to actually receive, and she didn't it's like she had and this is pretty common, like women will have, I guess, a block to receiving pleasure because it's like they don't feel like they deserve it. They don't feel like they deserve pleasure. They don't feel like they deserve to take up time and take up space and have someone else actually giving to them and, paying attention to them and worshiping them basically. So I like to talk about, queening out or like just being a total fucking goddess, like pillow princess in the bed. Like you don't have to do that all the time, but it's nice to be able to just drop into that space of total surrender and just lie back and receive, and not just lie back and receive and grit your teeth and hope it's going to be over soon so that then you can start, doing something else, but actually receiving, like
Mm,
enjoying someone's attentions, feeling worthy of it, feeling like you deserve it. And I kind of liken it to the way that we're taught to, and everyone's like this, and especially in Australia, there's this whole tall poppy syndrome. So we're not great at tooting our own horns and stuff, and we're kind of almost modest to a fault. But especially with women, we do not receive compliments well. We just don't know how to receive a compliment without pushing it back in the, is if you rock up at dinner, like it's way more likely you rock up to dinner with some girlfriends, it's way more likely someone's going to be like, oh, I feel so fat today or so ugly, than being like, oh, damn, I'm feeling fucking fly today. Like, I feel so hot in this dress. Guys, look at my butt, and likewise, like if someone rocked up at dinner and you were to give them a compliment, be like, oh my God, like you look incredible, like your skin, how often are they actually gonna be like, "Oh my god, thank you so much, I
yeah.
know." They're gonna be like, "Oh, what? No." Like, "No, oh, I'm having a bad hair day." Or, "Oh, no, like, look at this pimple here." Like, or they're gonna shut it down and then flick a compliment straight back at you and be like, "Oh, no, 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 like this old thing, but you, like," so we're not very good at receiving compliments. We're like uncomfortable with that. And so I try to remind people that that's like if you give a compliment to someone and they don't receive it graciously and actually let it sink in, and they don't let it feed them in the way that you intend. Like you give someone a compliment to make them feel nice, not to have it shoved back. So it's like giving someone a present and then being like, "Oh no, I don't deserve this. Here." And then them like pushing it back and kind of rebutting that. And so not only does that person not receive the gift, but you don't receive the beautiful feeling of getting to give a gift and seeing that person light up with enjoyment or like gratitude. And it's the same in the bedroom. If someone is giving to you, it sucks if they can feel or see that you're not able to receive that,
Mm,
and you're kind of not feeling worthy of it, or you're not feeling comfortable because you don't think you deserve it, or you're self-conscious, or there's a number of reasons that you could be in your head and not really letting that land. But it's so much more enjoyable if you are able to receive it and show your enjoyment of it because you're genuinely receiving it and therefore genuinely enjoying it. And then it's a two-way street that you both get to enjoy. Like it's pleasurable for them to give to you if you're actually receiving the pleasure how they're intending it. And I think sometimes if we're kind of rejecting our feminine, or we're stuck in our masculine and we're trying to kind of be a certain way, and we've rejected our femininity, then we're not going to be as good at receiving pleasure in the bedroom. So yeah, that's all I'll say on that, I think.
Mm. Well, that was a lot. And honestly, I truly believe that, especially with the deserving. So many of us never feel like we deserve having good things happen to us. And literally, last episode, I had that conversation with someone as well, but it was around business. And we never
Mm,
believe that we deserve the success that's coming to us. And I feel like that's the same with pleasure. We don't believe that we deserve to have pleasure, deserve to feel beautiful, deserve to feel handsome, however we want to feel. We should feel empowered and just ready
mm,
to receive all the love. So I think it's very powerful to be able to heal ourselves in a sense that we can start feeling like we deserve as much love as we can get. Because we do.
mm,
You know, we're
totally.
we're creatures of love and community, and so we need to feel that
Mm,
love and community. But now let's go on the topic about communication, because you mentioned that a
yeah.
little bit earlier about having conversations about safe sex. And I told you just before we even started the interview about my friend who was seeing this guy, and they decided to play a game of let's ask questions, any questions, and be honest. And she asked him whether or not he was sleeping with other girls, and his reaction was instantly like, "Oh, wow, that's a very, very deep question." And he's like, "I have no idea how to answer that, but I am." Yeah.
That's a yes or no question. Like,
Yeah,
that's not a deep question.
exactly.
That's pretty
So
straightforward.
I want to talk a bit about that because I feel like for a healthy womb or a healthy any types of genitalia anyways, you need
Mm,
to have these conversations because safe sex is something that needs to be talked about. But I feel like it's a bit of a taboo in this society.
mm,
This could be my own opinion. I think it's because we've finally managed to create a world where having casual sex and sex outside of marriage is okay and it's fine and it's powerful and it's so good. But the only thing is that now it's a bit of a taboo to talk about the safety and talk about who we're sleeping with. And also there's shame around STDs when they should not have a shame around STDs
mm.
because you don't even need to sleep around to catch an STD or be born with an
Yeah,
STD. So
totally.
open communication. So let's talk a little bit about that, what you've noticed with open communication and how to feel comfortable to talk about it. Um, I think that's one
Mm,
of the
mm.
biggest issues today is not feeling comfortable to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And especially in the dating world. So like maybe in a long-term relationship people get a bit better at this, and there's
Yeah.
probably less need to have, super regular conversations about it. But when you're dating, if you're having a hoe phase, if you're like, you're Tindering hard and you're sort of like getting about town and having a fun time, there's probably multiple like people that you could be having these conversations with and should be, and it's probably way more necessary than a long term relationship. But it's also way more daunting because,
Mm,
it's fresh, you don't know the person very well, you want to make a good impression, you don't want to be awkward, you don't want to be a loser. Like we've kind of got it in our heads that it's uncool to bring up these topics, and
yes,
you don't want to
exactly.
be the one to bring it up and be like uncool and make things awkward. Um, and I don't know where that came from, and it seems to be, like, quite an immature thing. I definitely know the younger the person, the more they're gonna struggle with this, so it is definitely a maturity thing, but I know a lot of older people that also wouldn't be able to have this conversation and would rather, have a one night stand or have, like, a casual hookup situation going on, friends with benefits, whatever, and put off actually broaching a topic like, when's the last time you got tested? Like, have you got any STIs? Are you sleeping with other people? Do you use protection with those other people? Should we use protection if you are sleeping with other people? And, or even if they're not, like, what about contraception? Like, where are you at with that? So there's like so many really important topics to cover that would actually like enhance, especially like, so if there's like a hetero, like a male and a female in like a hookup situation, the female in that equation is going to have a far better time if she feels safe around getting pregnant, getting an STI. You know, she knows where she stands. She knows whether they're sleeping with other people or not. Like if we had that information and we were assured of these things, we that would enhance our experience having sex. A big reason a lot of people don't enjoy sex as much is because they're worried about getting pregnant and they're worried about getting an STI. But we do it anyway because it's just like, oh, well, we're here now and it would be really awkward and uncomfortable to bring that up. And I don't want to be a prude and I don't want to be like, you know, it's like we just think it's so uncool,
Mm,
um, which is bullshit. Like, it's
it
such a
is,
shame. We
yeah.
need to change that. But I remember feeling so like uncomfortable and daunted about bringing something like that up. And even though I knew it was like putting myself at risk, I would rather just put myself at risk than actually look like a loser or, make it weird. And when I did sort of bring these things up sometimes, the dude that I was with might not receive that very well. Like it sounds like this guy that your friend was talking about. He's like, "Oh, that's a really deep question." Like, bro, that's not. It's a yes or no question, and then it will open up a valuable conversation because if you are sleeping with other people, we need to fucking chat about protection and we need
Yeah.
to chat about like boundaries and what this is and what our expectations are of one another because like someone's going to get hurt otherwise.
Yeah,
Um
exactly, yeah. And also our health is not something that we should be playing around with. It's something very important,
Mm,
and people don't understand that you're playing with somebody else's health if you're sleeping
mhm.
around. And I mean,
Mhm.
we have a lot of polyamorous relationships, a lot of open
Yeah,
relationships, and I feel like people in those relationships that I know of, they have a much better communication around it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
any newbies coming into it, they need to learn to be very open and honest about that. And like you said,
Mhm.
in our society is seen a bit as uncool. So going
Mhm.
into these relationships or even just with a friends of benefit, it can seem so scary. But it should be
Mhm.
so normal because our
Yeah,
health is our top priority, but also having casual sex is also great and wonderful and can bring you a lot of valuable things. It's not something that should be shamed, but neither is looking
totally.
after your health.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like it's pretty hard line, but my opinion is that if you aren't mature enough to have an open conversation about this stuff, you shouldn't be having sex and you definitely shouldn't be sleeping around. You definitely shouldn't be in open or poly relationships. Like I sort of did the open poly thing for a few years and I noticed just how phenomenal it was for leveling the fuck up with communication because it's essential. And if you don't, people get hurt, people get STIs, people get disgruntled or it's really really critical to have good communication and it was really great for me to like build those skills and develop those skills and just realize how important it was. But then I did notice if someone was kind of new to that, like you're saying, like the newbies definitely um, probably aren't quite at that place yet. And so a lot of damage can be done in those situations, especially when it's in those sort of like polyamorous, open style relationships. There's just so many places that can go wrong. And communication is like the sort of safety net that prevents not everything from going wrong, but a lot of the things. And
Mm,
yeah, I think it's just like if we're yeah, we sacrifice, we risk ourselves. I knew someone um who actually multiple people who would just take the morning after pill every time they had sex with like this like a one night stand or friends with benefits and it was like happening like once a week and she would just not use protection and then because she didn't want to say anything and I'm sure at least one of the guys she'd been with would have said, oh, I don't like using condoms, and so she got it in her head that was like, oh, I shouldn't ask them to, whatever, because that's a pretty common thing that you hear.
mm.
And so she would just take the morning after pill instead, and that was her version of contraception. And I was like, babe, this is not sustainable. That is so bad for you. And like if I feel like it's a way of weeding out the wheat from the chaff. It's a really good way of sorting out the boys from the men, and that's just an expression. I'm not meaning to be gendered here. 'Cause yeah, like everyone can be pretty shitty at this. But I use it as like such a good red flag detector. Like if you want to
Yeah.
talk about this stuff and they can't, don't fuck 'em. Don't fuck 'em. Like, just don't have sex with someone who can't meet you in that space of mature communication and isn't invested in, like, safe sex and making sure you're on the same page and, like, that they know your status, they know your boundaries, and your expectations. Like, even if it's just a hookup, the bare minimum, if it's a one night stand and you're never gonna see them again, fuck yeah, power to you, but the bare minimum should be protection and asking them, like, if you're not going to use protection, then at least asking them, when were you last tested, blah blah blah. Not that you're necessarily going to get an honest answer, but if
Yeah.
it's like, if you ask them, you can see how they react and you can decide if you actually want to have sex with that person. And if someone asks me these questions, I am impressed. I'm like, fuck yeah, you're actually a mature grown up and I do want to have sex with you because you've created this, like, safe, comfortable space where we can discuss the important things first. Um, and yeah, I just think it's a really good sign. And if not, red flag.
Yeah, because in my head, I was also thinking, I was like, what kind of advice can we give somebody to feel comfortable and confident enough to ask these questions? And honestly, there's nothing other than just trying to look after yourself first and just
Yeah.
jumping the gun and finding that confidence. I know it's scary, but just
Yeah.
jumping the
Mm,
gun and being like, hey, this is where I'm at, where are
yeah.
you at? What is all like your health, all of this. But
Yeah.
then also, exactly, it's going to show you whether or not that person is worth your time and worth your energy.
Yeah.
In my opinion, sex is so powerful and it's a beautiful way to connect to somebody. And you can create amazing art and amazing connections
Mm,
and amazing brain waves and so much, yeah,
yeah.
power and I don't know, so much goodness within your body from having sex. And so who you share that person with should be important on whether or not they respect you back. And respect
Yeah.
can
I
look
mean,
very
it's
different depending on who you are. Like, you can have respect with the person that you're sleeping with, even though you're sleeping with many different people. If it's a friend with benefit, a one
totally.
night stand, and one night stand can still be respectful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's exactly like you said, like it all comes back to self worth. And when you were asking, like, for some tips or advice on how to get better at this whole communication piece, it's like, well, it's not even about communication so much as self-worth and how much do you respect yourself? How much are it is a confidence thing, but then even underneath that is still self-worth. Like, if you don't value yourself or respect yourself enough to have that, that desire to protect yourself, um, then it's going to be really hard to speak up and communicate about this
Yeah.
stuff. So, working on your self worth, your sort of deservingness of being respected and being treated well, and then, having your questions received maturely is a big thing. And I think, like, just trying to, strengthen your resolve to be a good gatekeeper for your pussy and not let anyone in there that doesn't deserve to be in there and that hasn't at least earned it by answering a few little fucking questions,
Yeah.
that are going to help you feel safer and help you feel like, okay, cool, like, great, that's really good to know. Now that I know that, I can relax a bit better. We've just had it's opened up a bit of a conversation, so that's developed a bit more closeness and connection.
Mm,
Like, and
yeah.
this is with a one night stand. Like, you don't even have to ever see this person again, but the sex is definitely going to be better if you've had this conversation, you've built a bit of rapport, you feel
Yeah.
respected, you feel like they're able to meet you in that space and they're able to answer your questions and reassure you of certain things. Um, and just like, be if someone's like, oh, I don't like wearing condoms, and it's like a one night stand type thing, if it's a long term partner and they don't like wearing condoms, that's a conversation you can have. But if
Mm,
someone's trying to get out of wearing one that first time when you've never met them, you have no idea where they've been, yeah, that's a huge red flag. And it's like, do you want to put your body on the line and, like, sacrifice your pussy and health for this douchebag that's not willing to do the same for you. He's not willing to wear a condom for you, which is like, come on.
Yeah. But I think, it's something that you need to gradually get the confidence to do, because overnight finding that self-worth to be able to stand up to that
Yeah,
situation is really hard. So obviously not beat
totally.
yourself down if you haven't had those conversations, but just gradually finding that self-worth, because I think also that's
Mm,
what will help you heal sexually, is
yeah,
being able to realize how powerful you are and how
yeah,
beautiful you are, and just, yeah, how much love you have from deserving to receive, but then also
mm,
deserving to know honesty and have open communication. And
yeah,
exactly, people need to realize that having these hard conversations is what's going to create amazing connections,
mm,
and you're going to feel so much more love in yourself and within and around you if you start having hard conversations with people. And
yeah,
often it's not really received badly. A lot of hard conversations, people actually value the honesty and value
mm,
the questions being asked, because sometimes themselves they don't even have the confidence to
yeah,
say it.
yeah. Yeah, people are often impressed if you're like confident and mature enough to bring up that topic because they might be thinking the same thing but not wanting to ruin the moment or not wanting to make it weird, and they might be in the exact same boat as you. So it's like if you're setting the precedent, you know, that's going to make them feel comfortable and open up that space for them to have the conversation. And then also maybe the next time they're with someone else, they'll be like, "Oh my God, like well they brought it up and it was fine and good and maybe now I can bring it up." And if it just started to become more common, it wouldn't be a hard conversation. It would be standard. It would be like the basic kind of like default like conversation that people just had before they had sex with a new person. Or like wanted to understand after a while of sleeping with the same person, like where they stood, and not worry about freaking them out and trying to like pin them down. And because you don't want to be like, are you sleeping with other people, in case they get scared off or something
Yeah.
because they're anti-committal and they don't want to be tied down, and so you want to be the chill, relaxed, flexible one. And it's like, dude, maybe I'm not even asking if you're sleeping with other people because I don't want you to. It's more just I want to know whether we should be using protection, or like whether we need to have some boundaries or guidelines. Or maybe it is because I would like something more committed. And so I need to know now whether you're on the same page. Otherwise, I might have to go find someone who doesn't want to sleep with other people.
Yeah.
Like, and that is okay as well. Like, we deserve that. If that's what we want, we are worthy of that. So, like, a lot of what I work with people on does really begin at that self-worth level because, like you said, it's not an overnight thing. A lot of our, past and trauma does inform us in our space today that, it means a lot of us don't have a lot of self-worth and confidence, and it's going to take a while to build up, and it's part of the healing process. So, like, that's definitely where I start with a lot of people because that's integral if they're going to then be able to feel empowered in the bedroom and empowered in conversations like that.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
And on the topic of taboo and finding your self-worth and love, do you have any tips about STIs and STDs? We talked about how our health is important and all of that, but then there is a taboo about STDs, and I don't think that many people know how common it is. Um,
Mm,
because yeah, I
mm.
think it's very common. I don't know if I have the statistics on all of them with me, but I do know, like,
Yeah.
I think chlamydia is very, very common. Same with herpes, because herpes, you
Herpes.
get it on your
Yeah.
mouth, you can pass it through oral sex. And that one, I think, is like 60% of people have it in their bodies, but they just don't, not all of them will show it, but you can still pass it
Mm,
on. So I think there's a massive taboo around STDs, and we need to talk about that, because it can knock people down with their confidence, but it's a taboo that once again needs to be talked about. I think it was yesterday. Was I watching something, or was I reading something? But I heard somebody say that chlamydia is kind of like an infection, like how you get like bronchitis or something like that, and you just take an antibiotic and it fixes it. The only issue is that it's an infection to do with your genitalia, and all of a sudden that has a taboo around it.
Yeah.
And when I
Yeah,
heard that, I
literally.
was like, "Oh, wow, okay, that really changes perspective on things."
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it's so insane how much stigma there is around STIs because, yeah, literally chlamydia, like you can just take antibiotics, it's gone, no biggie. So many people have had the clap. It's just, I mean, what do you think's going to happen? We're having unprotected sex. We've got all of this, like, especially nowadays, like, a lot more casual sex and open relating and way more. I think like the average number of like different people each person has sex with in their lifetime has gone up a lot because there is so much more casual sex and dating and stuff now. And we're not sort of all like, oh, no sex before marriage and whatever. And dating apps have made it extra possible. So like people are having way more sex with way more different people and, shying away from conversations about safe sex like we just talked about. So it's really bloody common. And like generally it's just not a big deal. Like it's really most of them are really easily dealt with. And herpes so common, so common. But yeah, there's just an insane amount of stigma, especially the ones that you can't get. So like chlamydia you can just get rid of easily. But something like herpes, obviously, like once you've got it, it stays with you. It doesn't mean you necessarily have sores all the time. You could have it and carry it and not have any outbreaks for 20, 30 years if you look after your health. Um, and yeah, that's a whole other. I did a podcast episode on herpes actually, and one
Oh,
on
yeah.
STIs because of this exact thing. Like it's
What
it's
is it
so
called? So
stigmatized.
if somebody's interested, they can, search it up.
Yeah, just look up the labia lounge, herpes, and you'll find the episode. I can't remember what the exact like net title of the episode is, but I did that with the Yoni nutritionist who has herpes and really specializes in that and herpes awareness. She's amazing. And then I did one on STIs as well, so that some of the most common STIs. So just look up the labia lounge and you can scroll down and find those. But yeah, it's so important to like remove some of the stigma and taboo because it's pretty fucking common and normal and it's not the end of the world. Like you're not going to die, you're not gross, you're not dirty. That's just it's just coming from the stigma and taboo around sex and genitals. It's literally like any other kind of like illness or disease or thing that we get and that we live with and we treat or we cure or we manage. Like we have a lot of other things in our health and bodies like that don't have that level of stigma and in fact might even get some sympathy or get some funding or whatever. But then yeah, because it's around your genitals and sex and there's all of this taboo and stigma and shame around those, then that obviously turns it into this like horrible disgusting thing that makes you a slut or makes you like
Yeah.
yeah, filthy or whatever. So I think like the message is just, guys, it's really common. It's really
Yeah.
common. It's not a big deal. Um, and it does mean that especially like if you have something that's an ongoing thing, like herpes, it does mean that your communication is going to have to level up even more because that's a really important conversation you're going to have before sleeping with someone new. And that can be really challenging for people, but I think so like the woman I had on the herpes episode was saying that it's actually been a blessing in disguise for her because it's meant that her communication is leveled up because it's had to, and she's used it as a dickhead filter as well. It's like really weeded out the ones that
Yeah.
respond badly to that, and the ones that don't react badly to that mean that she just feels so much safer and has so much more respect for this person for being really loving and respectful and like, oh hey, okay, like that's not a big deal, like, you know and then also half the time the other person will be like, oh my god, me too. Phew, what a relief, like I've also got herpes, so like thanks for letting me know, but like we're good. And then that's like amazing for her as well. So she's kind of like, yeah, I just don't fuck with losers anymore. Like I
I
don't
love
I don't
that.
I don't have one night stands really easily and carelessly and thoughtlessly like I did when I was younger, and then kind of betray my body because I actually probably chose pretty badly and I didn't really want to do that, but I kind of just did and went along with it. She's like, I can't do that now. I don't do that now. I have to have this conversation of like divulging that I have herpes. And so that really weeds out the ones that I wouldn't have wanted to have sex with anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. But then also, like, the stigma that you said earlier about it's makes you a slut. Some people see that. And I think it's
Mm.
important to also remember that it's you don't have to sleep around with people to get that. Like, some people
No.
get sexually assaulted. All of that
Mhm.
happens. Or you can be in love with someone and not realize even the own person, it's not that they didn't communicate, it's that they just didn't know that it
Yeah.
was there, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
STDs are I forgot the word for it.
Asymptomatic?
Dormant. Oh, same thing.
Dormant, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Same thing, different
yeah.
words, yeah. So it can stay in your body for a long time before it even shows up. So it's really
Yeah,
not about sleeping around. And that person who might have
totally.
an STD or get an STD during the relationship could have never cheated and could be a loyal person.
Mhm.
So I think it's also important to just stop the stigma around that
Mm.
and
Yeah, big
communicate.
time.
Actually, the more you communicate with somebody who maybe has an STD, um, you can learn a lot more.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and like I've got HPV. That's another one. I've done an episode on HPV and cervical dysplasia because it's really kind of relevant to me because I had HPV for years without realizing, I'm sure. And wouldn't have a clue where it came from, but like it is so common. Like I think 80% of women at some point in their lives will get HPV and your body clears it up on its own. Generally, if you're in pretty good health, mine's pretty stubborn because I've had some health things going on. So it's been sticking around for a long time. It's turned into cervical dysplasia. And like I didn't even know because I got it when I was quite young. I didn't even know HPV was sexually transmitted because you can also like you can get it from other things, but it is mostly a sexually transmitted thing. Um, and because I didn't know, like the doctors after a pap smear were just like, "Yep, you've got some HPV, da da da, this strain." I was like, "Okay." They're like, "It's nothing to worry about." Um, and they never mentioned that it was an STI. And I never felt any shame. I didn't think it was weird. I was like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And then I met someone who got he it was like a friend of mine. His girlfriend got HPV from him. I don't know how they figured that out. And he was mortified. He was so ashamed. He was so mortified. She was like, "What the fuck?" And they were like, "Yeah, it's an STI." Like they were treating it like this, horrible thing. And it was just so different the way that they saw it and the way that they sort of reacted to it. And I was like, "Oh, wow. Like, shit." And then I noticed in me, a little bit of shame trickling in, like, "Oh, I've got an STI." And it's like, that was years ago, and I totally don't I don't mind. It's really it's the most common one, HPV. Um, but yeah, because there is all of that, like, stigma, it's just, like, we really beat ourselves up about it, and we don't wanna tell anyone, we don't want anyone to
Mm.
know that about us. But, like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Like, yes, you've got a higher chance of contracting an STI if you sleep with more people, but like, so what? Like anyone can get them. It's
Yeah,
like any other
even from somebody
infection or
that you
illness.
love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, I learned about HPV through my friend because she found out she had it. And I actually didn't even know it was a thing until she had it. But mind you, how old was I? I was probably 18, 19 at the time. But still, I was like, oh, wow, like maybe that is something that I should be educated on.
Mm,
Didn't even know that it was an STD or what it was and that it could be passed. And I think at the time, it wasn't that known at all. Like, I
mm,
don't even
mm.
know if it was really known to be an STD back then, whether it was like 10 years ago or something like that. Okay, maybe not 10 years ago. I don't think I was sexually active then, but But yeah, so yeah, educating ourselves on it, because actually another thing that because I had a lot of hormonal issues, and it was very scary because at the same time it's like, oh, do I have an STD? And then I educated myself on that and found out that there's some STDs that doctors don't even test. I
Yeah.
forgot the one that I wanted to test for. It started with an M something. And that's the thing. I don't even
Mm,
remember the name of it, but I found out that
yeah.
it's never tested. So I went to the doctors and I was like, "Hey, can I please test that? Because I've got uterus issues." And they were like, "Oh,
Mm.
due to COVID, we're not really doing those tests anymore because we need those tests for the COVID tests." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
so I didn't even get tested."
oh,
Luckily, my partner at the time managed to get an STD test where he tested for that, and he tested negative, so I was like, "Oh, hopefully it means that I also am
yeah,
negative because we weren't using protection and we had a long relationship." So I was like, you know, I
yeah,
hopefully, not really
yeah,
hopefully, but if I had it, he would have had it, and, like, it means that,
yeah.
none of us have it, we're all good. But that's how I found out, and same with herpes, apparently, you don't get tested because
No,
60% of
you
the
have to
population
request it
has it.
specifically. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
unless you have symptoms, you won't get tested. And for me, that was
Mm.
mind-blowing because at the time, I used to get tested every month. So every time I had a new partner or every time I finished it with a partner or even during a relationship, it was just every month I would get tested. So I thought I was educated on the topic. And then I found out that there's all these different STDs that aren't
Mm.
tested for. And
Yeah.
HPV usually isn't as well unless you get a pap smear.
Yeah, yeah, that's Pap smear exclusive, and yeah, herpes. I remember when I found out that because you do the standard piss test, and you think they're just screening for all STIs. They don't really mention anything different. I just assumed that they were, but no, they're only testing for like a few. And herpes is a blood test, so you have to really request that, and they'll only really give you a herpes blood test if you've either got symptoms or if you say I've recently slept with someone who has it and I want to test because they don't want to waste tests on people that aren't, prone to actually having the thing. So sometimes you got to be pretty pushy with doctors and be like, no, like give me the full board of like, like I don't just want the basics. I want, yeah. And you have to do a bit of your own research and go and kind of advocate for yourself and request the specific ones. Sometimes you have to tell a white lie and be like, yep, no, I slept with someone who had it and now I'm worried. Otherwise, they might not give it to you. But yeah, it is something that a lot of people don't realize and there's not a lot of common knowledge about. And yeah, that whole STI episode that I did on my podcast was with this doctor who like enlightened me on a lot of shit that I didn't know about around like common STI testing and how they do it and what they do and don't test for and how, she actually gave us a resource um that is like a list that you can take into the doctor and say, here you go, like these are the things that I want specifically tested for. And I was like, damn, that's so helpful because usually I just don't know what to ask for.
Yeah, I need to check out that podcast. I would love to get more educated on this topic. And hopefully, I'm hoping that, like I said earlier, now that we have this freedom to have casual sex, I think it's so new that we're yet to feel comfortable about having these conversations and we're yet to bring down the taboo around STDs and
Yeah.
around sleeping around and all of that because back in the day we didn't have any of that. So because it's very new, um, you know, we're not really perfect at it. And I'm hoping that over time it's going to be so much better and it's going to be a lot more free
Mm,
and be also have a lot more education in schools, hopefully. Because I
yeah.
realized that, yeah,
Yeah.
none of us really were educated.
Mm.
Um, because yeah, as somebody that used to test every month, I still realized I wasn't educated on any of it.
And you're still doing better than most people. Like getting tested every month is amazing. Like that's really rare for people to be super onto it like that. So yeah, I mean it could be cool if there was it'd be great for it to become more normalized. I think these things are just slow going. But
Mm,
in dating apps, if like every now and then on the dating apps there was like a little ad that came up and was like, have you been tested? Here's your nearest clinic that does like free sexual health testing. Like it's a good idea.
that'd be so
Or
good.
just yeah, yeah, like, there needs to be a little bit more self-responsibility with this sort of thing, I think. And, like, obviously, no one really wants to have to go and do it. It's annoying, it takes time out of your schedule,
Mm.
whatever. But, like, fuck, it's a good feeling when you get a clean bill of health and you can go fuck that person with, like, a clear conscience and just be like, "I'm sweet."
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm lucky, not so much, but in this aspect, I have a lot of health issues, so I'm always at the doctor's, so it's really good because every time I'm there, I'm like, well, I might as
Oh,
well add
yeah.
it to all my tests. So
Yeah,
for me, it's
yeah.
that, and I think that's the advice I would give. if you have a flu and you
Mm,
go to the doctors, just ask for a test. If you have any kind of
yeah.
checkups, always ask for a test because you're
May
there
as
already.
well.
So it's not
Yeah.
taking time out of your day, really. But I guess we will have to finish off on if you have any advice for maybe like a ritual or a prayer or something that somebody can do to get within their body and within themselves and within healing that sexual energy. Because I've heard recently of a lot of
Hmm.
sexual rituals.
Hmm. It's really tricky, like unless I'm working with a specific client to know like where they're at and what will be the most helpful for them. But a really, really basic one that might sound a bit simple, but is powerful and is more than most people do. It's really uncomfortable for a lot of people is getting a mirror and having a look at their yoni, at their pussy, like just doing a bit of pussy gazing in the mirror and like even using their fingers to part their labia, have a look at like the clitoral hood, lifting that up to see the clitoral pearl, like looking at the inner labia and the outer labia, like actually just doing a little guided tour of their vulva and familiarizing themselves with it and just going into a bit of a meditation where you might put on some beautiful music. I've actually got a playlist for this exercise because I give
Oh,
it as homework in my online course. And yeah, just doing a bit of pussy gazing, and you can draw it or paint it. You can kind of elaborate on this exercise as much as you like, and it's just a really honoring way of acknowledging your vulva, you know, kind of confronting any discomfort or shame that we have around that body part. A lot of people never look at their vulva, never, let alone touch it. They're like, nah, if they're cleaning it in the shower, that's about as far as it goes. They never want to actually be face to face with it and look at it, or touch it with their own hands. I find so many people are really uncomfortable with that and hold a lot of shame and a lot of fear about looking at it because they're going to be repulsed by themselves.
mm.
Um, so getting over that fear just bit by bit with little yoni gazing sessions can be beautiful. And if you're not quite there yet, I just tell people like just pay your attention more. Like wake up in the morning and for a minute before you get out of bed, just cup your hand over your vulva and just think about her, send her some loving messages, be like, hey, good morning, and at night before you go to sleep, like it's not going to interrupt your schedule. It's not going to take any extra time. Just if you can, remember whenever you think of it, but I like to do it in the morning and at night before bed, just cupping your hand over your yoni and just sending her some love and just tapping in like for a second and acknowledging her because we really do have this tendency to disconnect from the parts of us that we have shame around and make us feel uncomfortable. So, like, so many people, definitely all of the people that work with me, they come to me with this huge disconnect between their heads and their bodies, but in particular, their heads and their pussies. And so, like that exercise of just cupping it and just having a little moment to even just direct some attention and some energy to that space is going to bridge that gap and start to like um, yeah, reconnect you with that part of yourself. And I think that's a nice little ritual that you can get into the habit of doing. Yeah.
Wow, I love it. It's so beautiful. And I'm
Hmm.
guessing, obviously, if you don't have a vagina, you can also do the exact same.
Yeah. Totally. With any of your like your genitals, your breasts, that's really nice just to hold your breasts as well, because that's that heart space area. And the breasts are just such amazing, powerful organs. So any part of you, I mean, it's all about self-love and self-worth at the end of the day. So reconnecting with your body and with yeah, these especially the parts that are the sort of the butt of jokes and misogyny and the focus of a lot of stigma or shame or judgment. So the breasts, the genitals, those are like particularly charged areas of the body. Those are the most powerful places to do that with for sure, and they generally need the most love.
Oh, I love it so much. So, if somebody wants to work with you, how do they get in touch with you? Because I also heard that you have an online course.
Yeah, I'm super proud of my online course. I've just launched that recently. It's called Queen Out.
Oh, well
So it
done.
is really just about, like, I used the expression queening out before, but just really like knowing your worth, knowing that you deserve pleasure, you deserve respect, you deserve to be worshipped, and just feeling confident and empowered and comfortable in your body, in your sexual self, and competent in the bedroom. Which then branches into, I mean, there's a module in there around communication in the bedroom. There's a module around the menstrual cycle. There's modules around, self pleasuring and self worth. I do yoni massage and yoni mapping. So I teach you in the course how to do your own yoni massage and mapping. There's a module around trauma and how to navigate and recognize a trauma response when you're doing this work. Yeah, it's pretty much my kind of life work all just rolled into one neat course with a bow, and giving, that's going to take you through like a step by step journey to healing, your relationship with your sexuality and your vagina. It is for people with a vagina because a lot of the course content is around that, and feeling more pleasure, better orgasms, releasing tension, releasing trauma, things like that. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. So people can jump onto my website. It's just freyagraph.com. And you can click through to my online course. I'm on Instagram, freyagraph_the labia lounge. Got a potty called the labia lounge. Yeah, pretty much just Google that and you'll find me, and you can get in touch about, yeah, because I have the course, I have the potty, and I work with people online with coaching. And then also yoni mapping therapy if you're local. I'm in Perth.
Wow, that course sounds so powerful. Well, thank you so
Mm.
much for coming on our podcast today. I feel so honored and you gave us so much information. So I'm sure everyone's very grateful for everything that you shared today. So thank you so much for joining and see you guys. I will see you in the next episode. Bye.